That title might be a little bit over the top, but in this video, I will let you know why this laptop is probably the best bang for the buck laptop for photographers, and also why I wouldn't buy this OLED laptop for serious video editors, and instead suggest a different spec model that makes a lot more sense. As always, we have our recommendations linked in the video description below. If you guys buy through those links, that helps support our channel and helps us make more videos like this one. So if you guys buy through those, we would highly appreciate it. Thank you. After a long wait, we finally have Dell's latest version of its XPS 15 laptop, the 7590, which looks practically identical on the outside, but has some big improvements and updates on the inside, and a brand new OLED display, which is gorgeous. But there's one thing that really bugs me about this laptop that will really matter for some of you, but more on that in just a bit. Just like last year, it's encased in an aluminum shell that looks and feels great compared to many other Windows laptops. The display has very thin and great looking bezels, but the webcam and quad mic quality is quite poor. Along with that, we don't have Windows Hello authentication, which we absolutely love, but the power button doubles as a fingerprint scanner. The keyboard feels pretty decent for a Windows laptop with a good amount of travel featuring 2 levels of backlighting. Typing is pretty comfortable, but we do wish the keys were a bit wider. As before, build quality is really solid and it doesn't flex like many other Windows laptops do. And even though the soft coating doesn't feel as premium as an all aluminum design, it feels really nice to the touch. One thing that we can complain about is that there's no notch in the front to help you open it up. So you kind of have to jam your fingernail in there and kind of pull it open, and the hinge is also pretty stiff, so it's hard to open with one hand. The trackpad is also pretty decent for a Windows laptop. It used to be one of the best, but other brands have really stepped up their game recently, so now it's about average. As far as port selection, we have a headphone mic combo jack, full-size HDMI, 2 USBs, a single Thunderbolt 3 port, and thankfully, a full-size SD card slot. Dell really got it right on the ports that they offer, with both standard USBs supporting full 10 gigabit per second and the HDMI being version 2.0 for full 4K 60 support, and the SD card is a UHS 2 slot, which really speeds up transfers with newer cards. Charging is done through a barrel plug and a 130 watt power brick, but thankfully you can also use USB-C, but do know that that will be slower. My only disappointment, and it's a big one, is that there is just one Thunderbolt 3 port. I understand if this was a budget machine, but at almost $2,700, this 15-inch machine should at least have 2. Heck, even the $1,200 XPS 13 has 2 Thunderbolt 3 ports and another USB-C. Alright, let's move on to the laptop itself, which isn't huge by any means, coming in at 4.5 pounds, but putting it next to a 15-inch Razer or MacBook Pro, and it's definitely on the chunkier side. But with that extra size and weight comes a lot of conveniences. Taking off the back panel, we're greeted with a slotted NVMe SSD, Wi-Fi card, and even RAM, meaning that if you buy a lower end option, you can very easily swap it to 2 16GB RAM sticks for only $122, which I'll leave a link for down in the description below, and even up to 64GB of total RAM, which is rare in a laptop like this. This is very refreshing because many laptops are now coming with soldered RAM and SSDs. With this one, you can extend its life by upgrading it in a few years and swapping out the battery, which is also very easy and fairly inexpensive to do. The SSDs are on the slow side for NVMe, but the built-in Wi-Fi chip is quite good. One thing that still disappoints us year over year is the speaker quality, and this time it almost seems like it's worse than before. The volume is just okay, but it almost seems like the mids are missing and the bass just sounds like little popping sounds. Here's a comparison to my MacBook Pro. A few years ago, these types of speakers were the norm, but many Windows laptops have been making big improvements. I just reviewed a tiny 2.6 pound Lenovo, and that Ultrabook had better sounding speakers than this thing, and even Dell's own 13-inch XPS has 5 watts of speakers, with the larger 15-inch coming in with just 4 watt speakers. Dell, please fix this. On the plus side, the battery is quite large at 97 watt-hours, and unlike last year, we no longer have a big dip in performance when we unplug it from the wall. It's still there, but it's minimal. Before we touch on performance, let's first talk about the display. We have a non-touch 4K OLED display with 500 nits of brightness. I always thought the MacBook's displays were amazing, but putting that 500 nit DCI-P3 LCD side by side with Dell's OLED really made it look mediocre. If you want to watch 4K videos on this thing, wow does it look good. It's just a shame that the speakers can't keep up. Out of the box, the colors were too saturated, and that's with the cinema mode turned off, which pushes saturation even further. So if you want to work with editing images or video, I would highly suggest a display calibrator. I will link my suggestion down in the video description below. I was a bit worried about color accuracy since Linus Tech Tips OLED Razr had a huge color shift when maxing out the brightness, but after calibrating, my Spider rated the display at 100% sRGB and 98% Adobe RGB with the brightness turned all the way up. The model that he was reviewing went up to 600 nits of brightness, and going down just one notch on the brightness improved color accuracy by over 30%. But being that the XPS maxes out at 500 nits, it seems to avoid these issues, but I would still calibrate it and keep the brightness at the same level if you're doing color accurate work. Overall, this display is gorgeous, but that issue with color shift and also the potential for burn-in will push some people away. But thankfully, there's also an option for a standard 4K LCD, which is now also 500 nits and has 100% Adobe RGB color accuracy as well as touch operation. I'll comment on that screen and a different better setup in just a bit. Finally, let's get to performance. On the inside is an Intel Core i9 8-core CPU rated at 2.4 to 5 GHz, though I couldn't get it to run higher than 4.7 GHz even below 50 degrees Celsius in single core tasks. Pushing all cores to the limit using Cinebench R20, we got a beastly score of 3,381. Under full load, the fans are quite loud, louder than an 8-core MacBook Pro, but keep the CPU 2 degrees Celsius cooler, but at a still high 92 degrees Celsius, and the i9 runs at 100 MHz higher than in the MacBook Pro. Not a big difference, but it's there. Speaking of fans, the stock fan curve is annoying, with the fans sometimes even kicking up with the machine just sitting there plugged in too often when just browsing the web, but that can be adjusted in software. For photo editors, the excellent display paired with the 8-core CPU and SD card reader along with a variety of ports and good build quality makes this one of, if not the best bang for the buck photo editing laptops. The performance is ever so slightly better than an 8-core MacBook Pro as you can see by our test, but coming in at about $750 cheaper and with a better display. Of course, the MacBook has better speakers, trackpad, and SSD and is also slimmer and lighter, but it's not upgradable and has weaker graphics that don't really matter for photo editing. On the Windows side, for this price range, you're either gonna skimp on build quality, display quality, or get a 6-core CPU instead of an 8-core. Often a mix of those, so if you really need a powerful CPU with a great screen in this price range, the 7590 is likely your best choice. Now the tables turn once we get into video editing, mainly because of the NVIDIA 1650 graphics. I understand if the base option paired with a 6-core was a 1650, but even for the top of the line model, we can't get anything better like we can with other brands. Now the 1650 isn't terrible and it's a decent upgrade from last year, but paired with the powerful 8-core i9 graphics, it's now the bottleneck for video editing. In the last year or so, there's been great strides in GPU acceleration, and having a powerful GPU matters more than ever before. On the Mac side, Apple has been improving efficiency with their Metal API, and even though the XPS has more powerful graphics, rendering time for a 5-minute 4K project with effects took almost 6 minutes compared to 4.5 minutes, and the playback is actually smoother on the MacBook Pro as well. My MSI P75, which is a similarly priced laptop, but with worse build quality and display quality, finished the same project in 3 minutes and 52 seconds, even though it has a slightly slower 2.3 GHz i9 8-core processor. The difference is in the graphics, with the RTX 2070 allowing it to perform much better. The 1650 is just too weak of a GPU to pair with this 8-core, and as time goes on, graphics will be used even more, so it's a shame that with this great laptop, even at the highest spec, we don't have the option to get a better GPU. Testing a 5-minute graded project using raw video from the C200, the XPS is now closer to the MacBook Pro since this footage is more CPU intensive, but our MSI is still ahead at 30 minutes and 2 seconds. If you're a serious video editor and want an 8-core, we would highly recommend recommend looking elsewhere with at least an RTX 2060 and better speakers, since trying to work with the sound using the built-in speakers is really kind of a nightmare. Dell also sells a $2,099 model which has the same NVIDIA 1650 graphics card but with a 6-core processor, which is a much better pairing, and in many cases like video editing, gaming, and other GPU intensive uses, the actual performance will be exactly the same. That spec still comes with a 1TB SSD but only with 16GB of RAM, but you can easily change that and very affordably upgrade it to 32GB. You won't get OLED, but it's still a 4K display that is very color accurate. So even though I wouldn't recommend the 8-core OLED XPS 15 for serious video editors, if you're somebody that doesn't need the latest and greatest bleeding edge in terms of performance, the 6-core non-OLED model is a great bang for the buck. Overall, the Dell XPS 15 isn't perfect, and we wish that they would have made more external changes like adding more Thunderbolt 3 ports, Windows Hello, and better speakers. It's still a fantastic all-around value, especially for those that really need to have a good CPU. And not to forget, this laptop is still fairly upgradable down the line, where much of the competition isn't. Thank you guys for watching. This has been Max with Max Tech. If you guys want to see more videos like this one, click that little circle above, and then down below hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when we post new videos. And if you guys want to see a comparison between the Dell XPS and the MacBook Pro, you guys can click right over there. I will see you guys in the next video.